Hi, let's see how this goes because it's story time with Zadie. You know, this week we have Yud-Tes Kislev coming up. Yud-Tes Kislev, the holiday of the arrest and liberation of Rabbi Shner Zalman of Liadi, the Alter Rebbe. But why was the Alter Rebbe arrested? What was this all about, that he was arrested and went through a time in prison and then was liberated, came out of prison? Why was the Rebbe arrested? You know, I've put together the story, looked into it quite a bit. I've written some things down, so periodically I'm going to look down and glance at some of these things so I make sure I get everything in the correct order. So, why was the Rebbe arrested? Well, this happened at a time when the Baal Shem Tov had already brought Hasidus to the world. The Baal Shem Tov's Memale Mokom, Rabbi Dov Ber of Mezrich, he also taught Hasidus. And the Talmidim of the Magid, they came to Mezrich and they learned by him. And then upon his passing, the Rebbeim went back to their places to teach Hasidus. And the Alter Rebbe went to Liozna, where he lived, and he began teaching Chabad Hasidus, a special type of Hasidus, which would to bring the ideas of Hasidus into the minds of people in a way that the other Hasidim didn't attempt. And this level of teaching was new, and some people thought it wasn't right that the Rebbe should do this, but the Rebbe did it. And it also happened at a time when Russia had a very serious enemy. The Ottoman Empire, which today we call Turkey. So the Ottomans, they had a huge part in the Middle East. They had conquered many, many lands at that time. The Ottomans were a very powerful group of people at that time, Muslims. And they were very, very powerful. And north of Turkey is Russia. And across the sea, the Russians and the Turks were constantly at war, battling each other. They would fight a war and then go to rest for a little bit, and fight another war and then rest for a little bit. And at that time, the Turks, they controlled the Holy Land. And the Alter Rebbe, from Liozna, he would gather money from Hasidim and from friends of Jews who lived in the Holy Land, and he would send those Jews money because it was very difficult for people who lived in Israel at that time. And the Rebbe would send money to the Jews there. Well, the enemies of the Rebbe, the enemies of Hasidus in general, and particularly the Alter Rebbe's brand of Hasidus, the Chabad Hasidus, they saw a chance to get the Rebbe, and they voiced their objections to the people in the government of Russia. And the Rebbe was sending money to Israel, which was in the hands of the Turks. Well, what happened was, during the holiday of Sukkot, the Alter Rebbe was visited by some officers of the government. They came to question him, perhaps to arrest him. Well, the Rebbe heard that they were outside of his house. The Rebbe snuck out the back door. And when he snuck out the back door, he heard through the window what they were planning. They left, and the Rebbe saw the danger that he was going to be in. And what did he do? He went to visit with one of his Hasidim, Rabbi Shmuel Monkis. Yeah, Shmuel Monkis, the famous Shmuel Monkis. And the Reb Shmuel said to the Rebbe, Rebbe, you want to know what you should do? Should you go and face the trial? Maybe, maybe not. The story goes that Rabbi Shmuel Monkis turned to the Rebbe and says, Rebbe, if you are a Rebbe, you have nothing to fear. And if you're not, then you've been fooling us. You'll have to suffer your consequences. They will do to you what you deserve. And I think you should face the consequences. Well, Reb Shmuel Munkes really did believe that Rebbe was Rebbe and trusted that the Rebbe would go face the consequences and come out on the winning side. Well, after Sukkot, Chol HaMoed Sukkot passed, Simchas Torah passed, and on Isru Chag, a Thursday night, there was a knock at the door. They opened the door, and there, in front of the house, was the black carriage. 2 big black horses pulling this massive carriage covered in iron with not a window in sight. The officers said, "Where is Shner Zalman? He must come with us." The Rebbe gathered his things, entered into the carriage, and the carriage rode off into the dark. All night long the carriage rode, galloping along the road towards Petersburg. In the morning, about 10:30 in the morning, so I hear, it's getting about 6 hours before Shabbos, and the Rebbe bangs on the wall of the carriage. The carriage driver screamed, "What is it? What do you want?" "Stop this carriage now. Shabbos is coming. I must spend Shabbos in quiet. I cannot travel any further." "What? Are you kidding? Listen to him," cried the drivers to each other. "This man wants us to stop the wagon. Don't be silly. Sit back and enjoy your ride." "Stop the wagon now!" And with that, the axle on the wagon broke. Clink! Oh! The drivers jumped off the wagon, and one turned to the other and says, "Didn't you fix those axles this morning?" "Yes, I did." "Well, it broke." They went to go fix the wagon, and when one of the horses died, one of the drivers says to the other, "Go take a horse and go to the nearest town and buy another horse. Get back here as soon as you can. I will fix the wagon." And then he rode off. When he came back, they attached the horse to the wagon and began to pull away. And the Rebbe says, No. We must not travel on Shabbos. Take me into the field next to the road and let me spend Shabbos. The 2 men looked at each other and said, "You know what? I think this is a holy man. Let's do what he says, unless something else will happen to us." And they did. And the Alter Rebbe got to spend Shabbos quietly, not much to eat, not much pleasant conversation, but he didn't travel on Shabbos. Then, that night, they again climbed into the wagon, and off they went to Petersburg. When they arrived in Petersburg, they got to the prison. The prison is in Petersburg, in the fortress, big building with dungeons deep in the ground. Very, very difficult. Most people who went into this prison never came out alive. Those who arrived in the black carriage of all were worst. They knew they were not going to get out of this alive. At least most of them didn't. So the Alter Rebbe went into the prison, and as he went into the prison, they took him down into the dungeon, into a very, very deep place in the prison, locked him in a cell.